back here. But now Aaron's up here. They're all there. Trying to wait for her to move that way. All right. Good morning, everyone. The House Elections Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take the attendance?
Chair Cerniglia.
Here.
Representatives Wagella. Here. Hope.
Here.
Colazar.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
Churches.
Present.
Smith.
Present.
DeBoyer.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Representative DeBoyer makes a motion to adopt the minutes from the September 19, 2023 meeting. Without objections, the minutes are adopted. For today's agenda, we will have testimony on House Bills 4983 through 4986, which establish a secure automatic voter registration system. To get things started, we will need to go at ease for a moment. The Elections Committee will go at ease at the call of the chair.
The Elections Committee will come back to order. We will now have testimony from Representative Cerniglia on the Secure Voter Registration System package. The representative is joined at the podium by Neil Ubriani. Am I saying that right? Nice. Who is the Policy and Research Director at the Institute for Responsible Government.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee, for the opportunity to testify on this package of bills today. So, Michigan already has a partial automatic voter registration system, which was implemented under the leadership of our Secretary of State, Secretary Benson. And this is a good system. This is an increasing and streamlining voter registration. But this secure automatic voter registration package is really taking us the next step to update, streamline, and modernize our current system of voter registration. The current system still leaves hundreds of thousands of eligible Michigan voters unregistered, and we want to capture them into the voter registration system with these bills. This also increases security of elections. Even at the branch offices where the current voter registration is being implemented, it's still likely that eligible voters unnecessarily decline the opportunity to register because they incorrectly believe that they're already registered to vote, they're confused about their eligibility, or they're just in a rush to finish their transaction. Recognizing the opportunities to improve the automatic voter registration, Colorado, Oregon, Delaware, Nevada, Massachusetts, Alaska, Minnesota, New Mexico, Washington, and Washington, D.C. have all adopted a similar secure automatic voter registration model. Rather than relying on customer input, this secure absentee voter registration system, I'll refer to it as SAVER just for sake of time, leverages the documentary information already collected and stored as part of the driver's license transaction. Under Michigan law, people applying for a license provide either proof of U.S. citizenship or proof of non-citizenship. And this information is recorded and stored in the licensed database. With SAVER, if a person provides proof of U.S. citizenship and other eligibility requirements as part of the license transaction, their information is automatically used by the Secretary of State for purposes of voter registration. There is no need for customer input during the license transaction. The person receives a notice in the mail from the Secretary of State informing them of their registration and providing an opportunity to decline if they choose. Conversely, if a person provides proof of non-citizenship for the license transaction, they're automatically filtered out of any voter registration opportunity and no data is shared. SAVER offers significant benefits compared to the current automatic voter registration system. It streamlines the license transaction, helping to reduce lines, improve efficiency, and increase customer satisfaction. It increases the number of eligible people registered to vote. Other states have seen as much as double the rate of registrations through automatic voter registration when it's upgraded in this way. And it can also save money for taxpayers because each person registered to vote through a SAVER transaction is a person who does not need to file a paper transaction or a paper registration form or register using same-day voter registration. In 2020 in Michigan, there were nearly 50,000 paper voter registration forms filed for new voters. Research puts the cost of each paper form at $4.72. And similarly, there were another 56,000 people who registered to vote using same-day registration, which also imposes additional costs. In addition to improvements to the license system, the bill also provides for the SAVER system to be used for Medicaid transactions, which also verifies citizenship or non-citizenship as part of the enrollment process. And it allows Native American tribes to share information about eligible individuals with the Secretary of State and provides the Secretary of State authority to expand the SAVER system to any additional state agencies that verify citizenship or non-citizenship in the ordinary course of business. These provisions will ensure that Michiganders who do use a driver's license or a state ID will still have access to their constitutional right to vote. So really, these bills are just expanding the current automatic voter registration system so that we can include as many people as possible, get them registered securely, efficiently, streamline the process, and expand it to other government agencies that have the proper requirements. I have sitting beside me Neil Ubriani, who has a lot of experience and knowledge with working on these bills, and I'm going to let him provide some additional information and details on this and how it's worked in other states and how it will work here. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Chair Sternglue and members of the committee. My name is Neil Ubriani. I'm the Policy and Research Director at the Institute for Responsive Government. We're a nonpartisan organization that supports policies to improve efficiency and accessibility in government. The secure AVR system in these bills is exactly the type of policy that increases both efficiency and accessibility. Secure AVR streamlines voter registration for clearly eligible people when they interact with state agencies, while also improving election security, reducing transaction times, and saving time and money for clerks. These bills build on Michigan's existing AVR system, as the chair mentioned, and the current verification procedures for people applying for a driver's license or enrolling in Medicaid. When people apply for a driver's license or enroll in Medicaid, their citizenship status is verified in the ordinary course of the agency transaction. With Secure AVR, if a person applying for a license or Medicaid is fully verified as a U.S. citizen and meets all the other eligibility requirements for registration, their information is automatically shared with the Secretary of State for voter registration. The Secretary of State notifies new and updated registrants of the change by mail, and then they can decline if they wish by either going online or just returning a prepaid mailer that's attached to the mailer. This change streamlines agency transactions while making registration more automatic for clearly eligible people. Secure AVR also improves the accuracy of the voter rolls. When a registered voter tells a state agency, like the branch office for their driver's license or Medicaid, that they've moved, their voter registration is updated by default to reflect this change. 9 other states and Washington, D.C. have adopted Secure AVR, and the results have been very impressive. A Stanford University study found that Secure AVR roughly doubled the number of people registering to vote at the Colorado DMV, with a particularly large effect for young voters. Similarly, in Delaware, Secure AVR has increased the number of people registering to vote at the DMV by over 30%. In Oregon, studies showed that Secure AVR has helped bring more low-income, rural, and young voters onto the rolls. And I want to note that the secure AVR system in this bill is optimized to work with the pending pre-registration bill, HB 4569, ensuring that young voters can benefit from AVR. Secure AVR also makes agency transactions shorter. Other states have saved between 30 and 45 seconds per DMV transaction with this change, which reduces lines and improves customer satisfaction for people getting a driver's license. Similarly, people registered to vote through Secure AVR do not need to register through a paper form or via same-day registration, which reduces processing time for clerks and reduces lines at the polls. In conclusion, this bill will help bring thousands more Michiganders into the political process while also streamlining government operations. We thank Chair Cerniglu for her leadership on this bill and encourage the committee to support it. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Do we have any questions? Representative Smith?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here and informing us on this. I was made aware that the Secretary of State's office had some questions and concerns regarding this. Is there some insight that you guys could shed on what those were and where they stand now?
Thank you, Representative Smith. We are working closely with the Secretary of State's office to ensure that the bills are in a form for them to best implement them. And the Secretary's office is joining us shortly to testify, so you may want to reserve that question for their office. But we are working closely with them on these bills.
Representative Colasar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a big believer in expanding access to the ballot box. So my question to you is simple. Do you believe that these bills will register more qualified voters?
Absolutely, and I think Mr. Ubriani has the statistics to back that up.
I would just say definitively yes. People decline the opportunity to register to vote when presented during a transaction for a variety of reasons. A lot of people think that they're already registered to vote, and they don't realize that they're not. A lot of people are kind of just rushing through the transaction because they've been there standing in line and they just want to complete the transaction, and so they think that declining will shorten the transaction. I think a lot of us have been trained when sort of some additional option pops up, we decline. Every time I log into my bank account, they say, would you like to add a second number for your two-factor authentication? I think to myself, that's a good idea, but I'll do it later. And I think a lot of people just fall into that boat. The other situation is a lot of people who are on parole and probation don't realize that they're eligible to vote. There's a lot of confusion because every state has kind of a different law on that. But in Michigan, if you're not incarcerated, you are eligible to register. And so often those people self-select out of voter registration when they could register. And voter registration rates in that population in particular are abysmal. If you can get 10% of people on parole and probation registered to vote, you're doing better than most states. And so this is a way to automatically register those people when they're clearly eligible and they interact with a state agency like Medicaid or get a driver's license. Or there's a provision in this bill for people who are getting driver's licenses upon release from incarceration to have that be an automatic voter registration transaction as well.
I just want to add something really quickly to that, but that was a great explanation. I think it also kind of takes into account how young voters, when they'll first be registering or wanting to register to vote as they turn 18, a lot of times those are not in-person transactions because they've come earlier. But with this new system and the way that it would interact with the pre-registration, this would provide for a very streamlined, secure transition for them onto the voter rolls once they become of voting age, without them having to actually come physically to register. Or having to fill out that paper form or go to the clerk's office somewhere else. And it also clears up address changes. When people have a transaction and they're using a new address, that'll flag the new address for a new registration. And of course, if they don't want to change their address, they can respond back and let the Secretary of State know that. But yeah, I absolutely think this will increase registration. And I want to point out, I think Michigan actually has a fantastic voter registration system, as it is. But with that said, I believe this is the next step, and I think that for good democracy, our goal should be that every citizen has the opportunity to vote. So thank you.
When you have more people voting, you get elected officials who are more representative and emblematic of the population that they are representing. So thank you for your work on these.
Representative DeBoyer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, guys. Thanks for your testimony. A couple questions, if the Chair allows me a little bit of leeway. How did we land on Medicaid as opposed to some other agencies with the state? How do we land on Medicaid that would be the one that we're going to allow this participation of an agency that's outside of elections, outside of the Secretary of State, outside of a county clerk, outside of a local clerk to register people?
Sure. I'm going to have Mr. Ubriani, address that. But I do want to point out also that any state agency in these bills can become a voter registration site as long as they're collecting secure information on citizenship and non-citizenship. But go ahead.
So Representative DeBoer, the reason Medicaid is sort of chosen as the second agency beyond branch offices is because it definitively verifies citizenship for people enrolling in Medicaid. Everybody who enrolls in Medicaid has to be verified against a federal database, either as a U.S. citizen or not a U.S. citizen. And so when you're looking to reach the population that does not have a driver's license, so this isn't just sort of redundant, Medicaid is sort of the natural next agency. It serves the largest pool of people outside of people who have a driver's license, and it has U.S. citizenship verification. So the streamlined AVR process works in that context. But as the chair mentioned, any other state agency that verifies citizenship in the ordinary course of business could have this process used there as well.
Is there a clear definition of how we verify citizenship?
It's that it is verified either based on documents presented during the transaction or verified pursuant to an external database. It's not based on just sort of a checkbox on the form that says I am a U.S. citizen or I am not a U.S. citizen, because that kind of interaction raises the risk of somebody who is sort of limited English proficient or just momentarily inattentive or confused, just getting that question wrong. And that can be sort of a risk for both them and for the voter rolls.
But do we define those documents? Or is it going to be at the discretion of the individual that's collecting those documents? How do we define what those documents are? I guess
so the way this works in other states is, for example, in the branch office context, there's a list of documents that people provide in the course of applying for a driver's license. Some of those documents definitively establish U.S. citizenship, like a passport or a U.S. birth certificate. Some of those documents definitively establish non-citizenship, like a green card or a foreign passport with a U.S. visa. The way this works in other states is the Secretary of State determines exactly which documents fall into those two categories. And so then those documents are sort of coded into the system. So if Neil Ubriani comes into a branch office and he is logged as providing a U.S. passport, if I'm getting a real ID, they're actually scanning that into the system. That is going to trigger the AVR system. Conversely, if I provide a green card, it's going to trigger to filter me out of the AVR system. The reason those documents aren't specified exactly in the bill is because those documents are sort of subject to change. And so that seems like something that's better left to administrative action. So that list can be updated as the list of documents that are acceptable for a license changes over time.
So it's expected that as this process were to be implemented, that the Secretary of State's office would definitively define the acceptable documents.
Exactly.
Is there any reason so then there's no reason that we couldn't expand this to multiple interactions that occur if those interactions so choose to require you to present those documents, right? So
Right.
if at the county clerk's office, if you got a concealed pistol license, which by the way, you have to present definitive identification and all these things, if they said, hey, you also have to present your birth certificate, that could be an automatic registration, theoretically. Right?
Theoretically, yes.
Or buying a hunting license, the same thing, right? Theoretically could be an automatic registration.
If the documentation provided for the transaction establishes eligibility for voter registration, then yes, that could be an AVR transaction.
Do we know how many eligible voters in Michigan are not registered?
The estimates vary. I've seen at least 400,000 is probably the most conservative estimate.
And I guess this question would go to either. So Was there a clamoring? I mean, was there an outcry for, by citizens, hey, I'm having a hard time registering? Like, where's the impetus or motivation behind us doing this? Or is this just a decision by a group that wants to register more voters?
I mean, I think we may have different answers, but my answer is just good democracy. I mean, as we were discussing earlier with Representative Colarzar's question, our goal should be to represent, the majority of the people of the state of Michigan who are eligible to vote. So this helps promote good government.
I would just add that, automatic voter registration has been around for about a decade now. And, 24 states have adopted it in some form. And the 9 states that have adopted this system are really sort of providing lessons learned for other states for how to have the most streamlined, most secure system that's sort of most efficient at registering voters. And so I'd say that this is taking lessons learned from other states on best practices and incorporating them into Michigan's system.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Representative Churches.
Thank you. I was just wondering how many people were unregistered, but my question was answered. But I did wonder if out of those 400,000, if you knew if more of them maybe didn't have a driver's license or had more barriers and hurdles to cross. And I just wondered if you had any insight on that.
So I don't know definitively how many of them have a driver's license or not, but I think the goal of the bill is to sort of reach people beyond those who have a license. So the Medicaid component is probably the best suited to reach people without a driver's license. But obviously the Secretary of State can expand to other agencies if the combination of, branch offices, Medicaid enrollment, people being released from incarceration and getting a license, and Native American tribes is sort of still leaving a pocket of the population unregistered. And so that way, if there's an agency that is serving that population that's unregistered, the Secretary of State can expand to that agency.
Thank you. And I do want to recognize that a lot of times in our line of work, we make legislation to address failures in our system. And I just want to commend you for looking at this as more of a people-centered or consumer-centered legislation where it's already working pretty well, but you are just trying to improve the system and make it easier on people because you recognize that they are already having to deal with a lot in their everyday lives, and you are the experts and you're trying to streamline the process. So I appreciate just the thoughtfulness that you are putting into this to make access greater for people.
I think that's it for our questions, but I just want to say thank you for bringing this to us today. It sounds like that this is going to save time, it's going to save money, and just maybe, and hopefully it can help save democracy. With that, we will go at ease.
Thank you. The Elections Committee will come back to order. We will now have virtual testimony from the Detroit City Clerk's Office. Yes. Okay. Daniel Baxter, who is the election administrator for Detroit, is here via Zoom to speak on the Saver package. Welcome, Mr. Baxter.
Thank you so much, and it is a plum pleasing pleasure to come before this auspicious body on behalf of our Detroit City Clerk, Janice Winfrey. I will be bringing forth for the record a statement from Mrs. Winfrey regarding House Bill 4983. Chair Cernoglu and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of House Bill 4983. My name is Janice Winfrey, and I serve as its city clerk, as Detroit City Clerk. The secure automatic voter registration system sets out in this bill increase both access and efficiency, two things that Detroiters and Michiganders are entitled to in their voting experience. Secure AVR streamlines voter registration for eligible Michiganders interacting with public agencies. This change will conserve time, effort, and budget resources for my department and other local election officials. Each person registered to vote or updated through Secure AVR does not need to register or update through a paper form or via same-day registration, reducing wait times for voters on election day and allowing my team to devote more energy to other priorities. Better address data from state agencies will also ensure more accurate voter registration rolls and less undeliverable mail, saving my office time and money. I thank Chair Cerniglu for her leadership on this bill and encourage the committee to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. Do we have any questions? I see no questions, so thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
We will now have testimony from the Department of State. Aaron Shore, the department's legislative director, is here to speak on the SAVER package. Welcome, Ms. Shore.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members. I'm happy to be here today and support these bills in concept. As was noted, we are still working out a few details with the sponsor and the proponents of the bills, just because they do represent a little bit of a departure from the procedures that the department has undertaken so far for automatic voter registration, but we're always happy to learn and see where we can do better as well. And we certainly share the goal that the sponsor and others have noted of simplifying procedures for all eligible voters in Michigan so that they can exercise their right to take part in the democratic process. I'd like to just answer a couple of the questions that were put forward at this point. I think really the questions that have come down in our conversations primarily relate to two things. The first is that up until now, the Department of State has raised the voter registration question during the transaction. That has been on paper right now, and we're moving to an on-screen question for potential registrants. So that's one place where receiving the letter after the fact had, on first blush, seemed to us like a less efficient procedure because we would be sending an additional mailing. But we are interested to learn from other states and to know that they've seen higher response rates from that letter than from the in-transaction. I mean, I can certainly see that. We do all rush to decline something and just get finished with it. So we're pulling the data on our own transactions and what that decline rate looks like right now so that we can have an informed conversation. And I think, too, the other point of question where we're just looking at it a little differently was in those letters, how do we handle voters in that status? Is it, as the bills envision, you're registered unless you contact us? We had been afraid there might be some pushback from that, but what we're understanding is that other states have not seen any particular pushback from voters, and that, in fact, sending a letter and having that notice period could raise questions for clerks if we're not careful about what the status is of that person who's perhaps not quite in the system. So we want to be sure to get all of that right. So they're very technical questions at this point, and we do, to Representative Boyer's question already, for all of our driver's license and personal ID applicants have a very specific form, one document from this column, one from another, to establish legal presence. So we could certainly work with other state agencies to make sure that they have that. And then in the few cases where people have trouble getting a hold of documents, which often is our older citizens or folks that just didn't keep the same kind of records when they were young, we actually have a specific unit that deals with ID exceptions where that's all they deal with, so they know. But for the most part, it's very standardized what our branch staff are taking in and how they verify someone's resident status. So with that, I'm happy to take any other questions that the committee has and look forward to continuing to work together on these bills.
Representative DeBoyer.
Thank you, Chair. Have you taken any time to figure out timeline and cost to implement this?
It's going to be a while, and that is one of the questions that we're working out. Certainly, the department has our hands full right now with all of the early voting and those procedures. So we would probably be looking at least into 2025. We don't want any other unfamiliar procedures for clerks right now. They're making it very clear that they have enough changes on their plate. and certainly, if we wish we didn't have any resource constraints, but they are real in terms of DTMB and programming, so it'll be a little ways out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I see no further questions. Thank you for joining us today, Ms. Shore. We now will have testimony from the Canton Clerk, Michael Segrist. Welcome, Mr. Segrist.
I was exchanging pleasantries and thanking everybody. My apologies for not having the microphone on. This is my second time testifying before this body. The first time I did was in support of the pre-registration bill that did pass. And I'm extremely excited for House Bill 4983 with the kind of the merging of the pre-registration and the automatic voter registration list. There's a couple of reasons why I think it's phenomenal. There's obviously a substantial amount of philosophical reasons, and so, and to answer one of Representative DeBoyer's question, I was one of the individuals clamoring to have this done, not necessarily going from an opt-in to an opt-out voter registration, automatic voter registration system, but mostly for merging pre-registration and automatic voter registration. And it's because I like clean voting rolls. I like clean voting lists. And when the National Voter Registration Act was passed in '92, it allowed every single citizen of the United States of America the right to register to vote on a mail form. And mail forms, it's phenomenal that they offered that, and the reason they offered that is because election administration wasn't uniform in all states, and some people were left out of the system, and it's good to protect people and allow them to have that right. But what paper registration forms, specifically mail paper registration forms, do is they create a situation where you can have transcription errors by election officials when we enter voter registration data into a system. Additionally, voters can put in wrong information sometimes when they're filling out a paper form. Also, if you don't put in the last four of your social security or your driver's license number, you have a special status. It's you don't meet the federal voter ID status. You have to vote in person on your first election, and you have to bring some form of ID so that you can't just register, you know. Despite what you read, what you see on social media, you can't just register your dog or you know, somebody who's not a human. They would have to physically show themselves in person, and that's great. So the system has some security measures, it has some protections for voters, but it's super inefficient, and I don't like inefficiencies. And government has a monopoly on administering elections, and so sometimes we don't innovate because we don't look at it as a customer service. We look at it as something different than that. So I'm excited. I do a lot of voter registration drives at my high school. I'm hoping that voter registration drives can become something we learn about in history books so that we don't have to have these paper forms, we don't have to have mail-in voter registration forms, and we don't have to show up to high schools, which also leave out homeschoolers or people in the private schools because I don't do voter registration drives there in Canton Township. I want to make sure that all individuals, and so when we switch to the automatic voter registration system, we saw a huge increase in registered voters. What we didn't see was a substantial or an adequate increase in voters or potential voters between the ages of 18 and 21, because a lot of people get their driver's license. They interact with that DMV prior to turning 18, and they don't interact again until they turn 21. And those are also people who don't show up to vote a lot. So that you got individuals who don't show up to vote frequently, individuals who are already not, who are qualified but not likely to be registered to vote. Combining an automatic voter registration system where you have a driver's license or a state ID number already in the system, you have the name spelled correctly, you have an address spelled correctly, it's automatically in there. To link those two things in a state that pioneered motor voter would be huge. It would also be revolutionary. We would be leading the way, and it would lead to better, cleaner voter rolls. I like also the idea of doing it just the lazy part of me. I don't want to have to be inputting pre-registration forms into the computer. I would love it if it's done at the DMV and it's already linked to the motor voter file. So it's efficient, it's more cost effective, and it will increase voter registration. It will hopefully drive turnout, and it will decrease the likelihood of deadwood on the voter rolls, which are individuals who are registered multiple times or something like that, stuff that we routinely try to get rid of. Every time we automate a process, what we see are efficiencies. When the qualified voter file went electric back in the 90s, we saw the elimination of 800,000 duplicate voter registrations. That in and of itself is amazing and awesome. So that's why I wanted to see this. That's why I'm excited about this. It's very rare that government kind of exceeds expectations and it acts proactively and prioritizes efficiency. So thank you. Thank you to the bill sponsor.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for Mr. Segrist? Just wanted to say that really brought back memories for me as well, doing voter registration drives when we would present the East Lansing city clerk with literally thousands of forms. And while she was very excited that we were doing that, I can only imagine what work that entailed for her office to process. So thank you for that testimony.
Thank you.
We will now have testimony from Promote the Vote. And here to testify on behalf of Promote the Vote is Melanie Macy and Erica Peresman. Welcome.
Chair Cerniglu and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Melanie Macy. I'm Policy Counsel with Promote the Vote, a nonpartisan coalition dedicated to preserving and protecting voting rights in Michigan. I'm joined today by my colleague, Erica Peresman, Senior Advisor at Promote the Vote. We're here in strong support of House Bill 4983, which would upgrade Michigan to a secure automatic voter registration system at multiple agencies that already confirm all elements of voter eligibility. This change will streamline the voter registration process for all Michiganders, especially for nursing home residents, young adults, and others who can face unique impediments to registration. In 2018, Michigan voters passed Prop 3, creating a right to automatic voter registration during driver's license transactions. To implement this requirement, the 2018 legislature created what is known as a partial AVR system for people conducting driver's license or ID transactions at Secretary of State branch offices. This partial AVR system has driven major improvements in voter registration, but as has been noted, there are still at least over 400,000 unregistered but eligible citizens in Michigan. Recognizing that our AVR system can be made more efficient, effective, and secure, this bill incorporates best practices from other states to improve AVR in Michigan. First, to reach eligible Michiganders without a license, the bill expands AVR to other agency transactions where U.S. citizenship is verified, including Medicaid enrollment and release from incarceration. This upgrade ensures that as many eligible citizens as possible can benefit from streamlined registration, even if they don't drive. Second, this bill complements the other election improvements in Michigan, as we just heard from the clerk. This bill works with the pending pre-registration bill to ensure that AVR actually reaches eligible young people getting their first license. As a mom of a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old, it's of particular interest to me. For most young drivers, their licensing interactions are automatically triggered by this bill. This turns those automatic events into voter registration opportunities, while still sending those eligible pre-registrants a mailer with an opportunity to decline voter registration services. Critically, this bill fully streamlines the AVR process for all eligible voters at covered agencies. People who are clearly eligible to vote based on the information provided to an agency will have their data automatically shared with the Elections Bureau for registration and updating. The Secretary of State will then contact new registrants by mail and inform them of options to decline registration if they choose. This letter to new registrants also provides a way to educate voters about new early voting and mail voting options, and it creates another avenue for sign up for the new permanent absent voter list, or to show interest in serving as election workers. This change shortens agency transactions and avoids people declining registration because they incorrectly believe they're ineligible or they've already registered to vote. And finally, this bill does increase election security. Anyone registered through the streamlined AVR system will be verified as a U.S. citizen based on the materials provided in the agency transaction. In addition, streamlined updates from more agencies will improve the accuracy of voter rolls. More accurate voter rolls saves money and time for clerks, time on election day, and ensures that election mail reaches the correct addresses. So with this bill, Michigan leaps to the forefront of voter registration, adopting a secure, efficient, and accessible AVR system that serves as a model for other states. I urge you to support this bill, and we're happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Do we have questions? I see no questions. Thank you both for joining us.
Sure.
And we will now have testimony from voters, not politicians. on the SAVER package. And here to testify on behalf of VNP is Ricky Bicknell. Welcome, Mr. Bicknell.
Good morning, Chair Cerniglu and distinguished committee members. I am Ricky Cervantes Bicknell, Government Affairs Manager representing voters, not politicians. On behalf of the thousands of voters who comprise the beating heart of VNP, I am here to offer our enthusiastic support for HB 4983 and the implementation of secure automatic voter registration for all eligible Michigan voters. Secure automatic voter registration provides a 21st century solution that protects the integrity of voter rolls and facilitates more accessible voter participation. An individual who is registered through SAVR has their voter registration updated automatically when they move, making it easier for the thousands of Michiganders who change residence each year to maintain accurate voter registration. SAVR also improves the security of Michigan's elections administration and prevents errors in registration, removing the guesswork that comes from having to decipher voter handwriting and clerical errors that occur in the traditional data entry process. VNP's volunteers and supporters fight for policies that give a greater voice to voters in our state. By enabling automatic voter registration when citizens interact with Medicaid and the Department of Corrections, for example, removing burdens from voters and preventing errors, this bill will significantly increase voter participation. HB 4983 will modernize Michigan's voter registration processes, protect the integrity of voter registration administration, and streamline the process for all eligible Michigan voters. Voters Not Politicians is happy to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bicknell. Do we have questions? Seeing no questions, thank you for your testimony. And now we will have testimony from Marcus Cheatham, who recently retired as the Assistant Deputy Health Officer and Public Information Officer at the Ingham County Health Department. Mr. Cheatham is here on behalf of Healthy Democracy, Healthy People. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. Little correction, I was the local health officer for Clinton, Gratiot, and Montcalm counties when I retired.
I apologize.
Since I've retired, I've been volunteering with Healthy Democracy, Healthy People, which is an initiative of our country's major public health associations, including the American Public Health Association and dozens of others. Public health is about strengthening the factors that promote health in our communities. And one of the factors that is robustly associated with health is the presence of strong democratic institutions, including high levels of voter participation. Healthy Democracy, Healthy People has published its findings in the Health and Democracy Index, which is linked in my written testimony, and I encourage you to look at that. Those results show that states that have high levels of voter participation are healthier. Specifically, states that have things like secure automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration, reasonable ID requirements, reenfranchisement of incarcerated people, and vote by mail are states that have longer life expectancies and lower mortality rates. Why should this be so? Let me tell you about what I saw as a local health officer. People understand the things that make themselves and their families healthier, and they often tell us that they don't need public health to explain that to them. But because of time constraints, poor access to transportation, family issues, low income and vulnerable people often cannot participate in our political processes. And as a result, the public policies that we create sometimes fail to meet their health needs. So let's make sure that every citizen is a voter and all voters' voices are heard. Please support HB 4983. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cheatham. Do we have any questions? I don't see any questions, so thank you for your testimony. Now, I am just going to read some cards into the record. We have Brad Williams from the Detroit Regional Chamber in support of House Bill 4983. Lata Knott from Voting Rights at Campaign Legal Center in support of 4983. Ashia Brown from All Voting is Local Action Michigan in support of 4983. John Lindback, National Vote at Home Institute in support of 4983. Matt Patton from Protect Democracy in support of 4983. And we also have Bill Zagman from GCSI representing the Michigan Association of County Clerks and Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks in support, in concept, of House Bills 4983 through 4986. So that would be the full package. Also, Nick Acapenti from LCV, League of Conservation Voters of Michigan, in support of the package. Marissa Kovach, ACLU of Michigan, in support of this package. Thomas Luckett, Michigan Democratic Party, in support of this package. And then we have Sherry Ritchie from Pure Integrity Michigan Elections, Michigan Fair Elections, Stand Up Michigan, and the Freedom Alliance is in opposition to the package, as well as in opposition to SB 385. We also have Darlene Hennessy from PIME, Michigan Fair Elections, and Stand Up Michigan in opposition of the package and SB 385. And I think I said opposition for Sherry Ritchie as well. I just want to make sure I said the correct words there. And then we also have a card from Dave Hodgins from the Michigan Municipal League in support of Senate Bill 385. For the committee and audience, the SB 385 was the election inspector bill that we heard at our last hearing. And now Representative Kolazar makes a motion to report SB 385 with recommendation. Mr. Clerk, please call the vote.
On the motion to report, Chair Cerniglia?
Yes.
Representatives Wagella?
Yes.
Pope?
Yes.
Colazar?
Yes.
Burns?
Yes.
Churches?
Yes.
Smith?
Pass.
DeBoyer?
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays, 2 pass. SB 385 is reported for recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. There being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned.